I want you to think about someone you know. Maybe it's your dad. Maybe it's an older uncle. Maybe it's a coworker who's been at the company longer than anyone else can remember. Someone who worked hard their whole life, who showed up every day, who paid their bills and raised their kids, and never really complained. And now they're in their late 60s or early 70s, and they're tired. Not retired, tired. Still working a job they never planned on still being at, still watching their bank balance and hoping it holds, still lying awake doing math on whether Social Security and savings are actually going to be enough to get them through. You probably know someone like that. Most Americans do. And here's the thing that never gets said out loud about that person. It wasn't bad luck. It wasn't that they didn't work hard enough or that they made some catastrophic financial mistake. It was one decade. One specific 10-year window where the decisions they made, decisions that felt completely normal at the time, decisions their neighbors were also making, decisions that nobody warned them about, quietly determined everything that came after. That decade was their 40s. My name is Ken, and today I want to have the honest conversation with you that nobody had with that person before it was too late. Because here's what I know. If you're in your 30s, your 40s, or even your early 50s right now, the door is still open. Maybe wide open, maybe just cracked, but it's open. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly what's on the other side of it, and exactly what you need to do to walk through. If this is the kind of honest, no-nonsense financial conversation you've been looking for, make sure you hit subscribe and give this video a thumbs up. We're a small channel that's building something real here, and every subscriber genuinely matters to us. Now let's get into it. To understand why your 40s carry such extraordinary financial weight, you need to understand three things that are true at the exact same time, and only at the exact same time, during that specific decade. And when you see how these three forces line up, you start to understand why this window is so different from everything that came before it and everything that comes after. The first force is peak earning power. For most American professionals, income reaches its highest point somewhere between age 42 and 55. The raises that felt significant in your 30s slow down or stop entirely after that, and hiring discrimination starts quietly affecting your options by the early 50s, whether we like to admit that or not. Your 40s are, in all likelihood, the highest earning years of your entire working life, which means they're the years when you have more raw material available to build wealth than at any other point in your career. A 44-year-old earning $95,000 a year has more genuine savings potential than that same person at 34 earning $70,000, even after accounting for inflation and the cost of living increases that come with life in your 40s. The second force is compounding time, and this is where the math gets genuinely important to understand. At 40 years old, you still have roughly 25 years until traditional retirement. At a 7% average annual return, which is a conservative and honest long-term estimate for a diversified index fund portfolio, a dollar invested today roughly quintuples by the time you're 65. More specifically, $1 invested at 40 becomes approximately $5.40 by retirement. That same dollar invested at 50 only becomes about $2.76. And invested at 55, it barely doubles. The compounding multiplier drops dramatically with each year that passes, and this is the thing that most people don't fully absorb. You cannot buy that time back later, no matter how aggressively you save in your 50s. The money you put in at 43 works almost twice as hard as the exact same dollar put in at 53, and that gap is simply not recoverable through effort or discipline alone. The third force is expense stabilization. Your 30s were expensive in ways that were genuinely hard to control. Young children, a starter home, building a career wardrobe, furnishing an entire life from scratch, all while your income was still climbing toward its peak. By your 40s, many of those costs have plateaued or started declining. Kids are older and more independent. The house you stretched to afford now fits comfortably in your budget. The career is established. And this stabilization creates something that didn't really exist before: margin. Potential space between what you earn and what you actually need to spend. The entire question of your 40s, the one question that determines everything about your financial future, is simply where that margin goes. Does it flow toward building your future, or does it get absorbed by expanding your present? Those two paths look almost identical from the outside during the decade itself. They look completely different at 70. Let me show you exactly what this looks like in real dollars, because I think most people have never actually seen this math laid out plainly and honestly. Consider someone who reaches 40 with $85,000 already saved in retirement accounts, a solid start, earning $110,000 a year, and who could reasonably save 15% of their income, about $16,500 per year, if they chose to prioritize it. Here's what 3 different versions of that person's next 25 years actually produce, all calculated at a 7% annual return. If they actually save that 15% consistently from age 40 to 65, investing in diversified index funds, they'll accumulate approximately $1.5 million by retirement. Combined with Social Security, they're looking at a genuinely comfortable retirement with real margin and real options. That's version 1, and it's not a fantasy. It's just consistent, disciplined behavior over 25 years. Now consider version 2. This person drops to saving only 5% during their 40s, telling themselves it's temporary, that they'll catch up when the kids are done with college, or when the mortgage is lower, or when things just settle down a little bit. At 50, when retirement suddenly feels more urgent, they get serious and jump to saving 20%. Despite that aggressive course correction in their 50s, they accumulate approximately $1.22 million by retirement. That's $280,000 less than version 1. Not because they earned less money, not because they made worse investments, but purely and entirely because of when the money went in. The 40s contributions compound for 25 years. The 50s contributions only get 15. And then there's version 3, which is probably the most common story in America. Income grows through the 40s, but so does everything else. The house gets bigger, the cars get nicer, the vacations get more elaborate. The lifestyle expands to meet and then slightly exceed the income. Retirement contributions average just 2% through the 40s, and at 50, reality sets in and they start maxing everything out. Despite that aggressive 50s saving, they end up with approximately $1.1 million by 65. That's $400,000 less than version 1. And that gap wasn't created by a disaster or a crisis or a string of bad luck. It was created by a single decade of decisions that felt, in the moment, completely reasonable. That's the thing that should really stop you. Those people weren't being reckless. They were just being normal. And normal in your 40s, when it comes to money, often means quietly foreclosing on the retirement you actually wanted. So what actually determines which version of your 40s you end up living? It comes down to 5 specific decision categories, and I want to walk through each one honestly because they don't get discussed with the kind of clarity they deserve. These aren't abstract habits or vague advice about spending less. They're real decisions that real American families face and where the outcome gets determined. The first decision is housing, and this might be the single most consequential financial choice most people make in their entire lives without realizing it. Your 40s almost always bring the urge to upgrade. The kids are bigger and need more space, you've earned some success and you want a home that reflects it. The mortgage payment feels manageable given your income. What most people don't understand when they're standing in that open house feeling like they've finally arrived is the true cost of that upgrade. Moving from a $320,000 home to a $550,000 home in your early 40s increases your monthly housing costs by roughly $1,400 to $1,800. That's between $17,000 and $22,000 annually that cannot be invested over the following 25 years. At 7%, that monthly difference compounds to somewhere between $1.06 million and $1.37 million in retirement wealth. The house upgrade doesn't cost $230,000. It costs over $1 million in retirement money, and most people making that decision have absolutely no idea. I'm not saying nobody should ever buy a bigger home. I'm saying that decision deserves to be made with full understanding of what it actually costs. And right now, most people are making it without that understanding. The second decision is vehicles. Your 40s income can suddenly make a $55,000 SUV feel reasonable. The payment fits. You've worked hard. Why not? But a family running 2 premium vehicles instead of 2 practical ones spends roughly $400 to $600 more per month on payments, insurance, and maintenance combined. Over time, that vehicle premium costs somewhere between $200,000 and $350,000 in retirement wealth, depending on how frequently vehicles get replaced. That's not a car. That's a substantial portion of financial freedom trading hands for something that will be worth $8,000 in 10 years. The third decision involves children's education, and this one is the emotionally hardest, because you've worked your whole life partly for this. The impulse to give your kids every possible advantage is not wrong. It comes from a good place. But taking on $80,000 or $100,000 in Parent Plus loans to send a child to a prestigious university, or cashing out retirement accounts to cover tuition, or simply stopping retirement contributions entirely during the college years, each of these decisions mortgages the parent's retirement to fund the children's starting line. Your kids will graduate into their peak earning years with their whole careers ahead of them. You will enter your 50s with depleted savings and barely a decade to recover. The families who navigate this successfully without wrecking their own retirement all tend to have one thing in common. They had the honest conversation early, before the college decisions were made under emotional pressure. State universities, merit scholarships, work-study programs. These aren't failures or settling. They're options that don't require a parent to work into their 70s. The fourth decision is career risk tolerance, and this is one that most financial content doesn't talk about at all. Your 40s represent your last real window for significant income acceleration. New companies recruiting you for senior roles, industries where your experience commands a premium, the negotiation you've been putting off because the timing never feels quite right. These opportunities become harder to pursue with each passing year after 50, when hiring discrimination starts quietly affecting what's available to you. The person who takes a strategic career risk at 43 has time to recover if it doesn't work out. The person who waits until 53 simply doesn't have that runway. The income difference between staying comfortable and genuinely pursuing growth can easily run $25,000 to $40,000 annually, and over a decade, that's hundreds of thousands of dollars in additional earning power that compounds into retirement security. The fifth decision is what I'd call lifestyle current acceptance, and it's the subtlest one, but probably the most powerful of all. Your 40s come with enormous social pressure to display success. Colleagues are taking elaborate vacations. Neighbors are renovating their kitchens. Friends are buying boats and talking about second homes. Some families resist this current deliberately, maintaining the lifestyle that felt comfortable in their late 30s and directing every dollar of income growth toward their future instead. Others drift with it, absorbing every raise and bonus into visible consumption without ever making a conscious choice to do so. It just sort of happens because everyone around them is doing the same thing. The retirement outcome gap between those two families typically exceeds $1 million. Not because one was reckless and one was disciplined, but because one made a deliberate, active decision, and the other just went along with the current without realizing there was a choice to make. I want to tell you about two families, because I think the numbers become real when they're attached to actual people making actual decisions. Both of these are based on real situations, with names changed. Marcus and Diane were in their early 40s with a combined income of $155,000 and about $170,000 saved in retirement accounts. 2 kids, ages 11 and 8. By most measures, they were doing well and on a reasonable path. Marcus had always wanted a little more space. The kids were growing. They'd earned it. A comparable home in a nicer development would cost $510,000, and their current place would sell for around $295,000. Christine felt a little hesitant, but eventually agreed, and the housing upgrade increased their monthly costs by about $1,500. To manage it, they reduced retirement contributions from 14% down to 7%. It was temporary, they told themselves, just until they got settled in the new place. 2 years later, Marcus's car developed problems, and rather than repair it, they decided he'd earn something nicer. The new SUV added about $520 to their monthly expenses. Diane's car got upgraded the following year. When their older child hit high school, the college pressure arrived. And when she got into an out-of-state school with a $52,000 annual price tag, Marcus and Diane took on Parent Plus loans rather than ask her to choose something more affordable. It felt like an investment in her future. Throughout all of this, Marcus and Diane never felt financially irresponsible. Every single decision had a reasonable justification. They weren't being reckless, they were just living like their peers. At 50, they sat down with a financial advisor for the first time in several years. Their retirement accounts held $484,000. After a full decade of contributions and a strong market, they had grown by only $314,000 from where they'd started at 40. The advisor did the projections. By 65, assuming they maximized contributions from that point forward, they were looking at approximately $1.1 million. And that number sounds okay until you factor in inflation, healthcare costs, the fact that their mortgage still had years left on it, and the very real possibility of living into their late 80s. The math was uncomfortable. The decade of decisions that felt completely normal had quietly built a retirement that was going to require constant calculation and worry rather than the freedom they'd imagined. Now let me tell you about Kevin and Sandra. Their picture at 40 looked remarkably similar to Marcus and Diane's. Combined income of $148,000, retirement savings of $160,000, 2 kids, ages 10 and 7. Kevin had been thinking about upgrading their home too. Sandra pushed back, not because she didn't want a nicer place, but because she'd actually run the numbers and understood what that decision would cost them in retirement wealth. They talked about it seriously, looked at the math together, and decided to stay in their current home. The roughly $1,500 a month in additional housing costs they avoided went directly and automatically into retirement accounts. They didn't heroically resist temptation every single month. They just automated the contributions and moved on with their lives. When Kevin's car needed replacing, they bought a 2-year-old certified pre-owned vehicle with low miles. It drove perfectly fine. When college approached, they'd had honest conversations with their kids early, before the decisions were being made under pressure. Both children attended state universities, one with a merit scholarship, and both worked part-time. Kevin and Sandra contributed what they reasonably could without touching retirement, and they maintained their contributions throughout. During their 40s, their lifestyle looked more modest than their peers, less impressive from the outside. But at 50, their retirement accounts held $621,000. Same market conditions, same decade, almost $600,000 more than Marcus and Diane. By 65, Kevin and Sandra had accumulated approximately $1.57 million. Their house was paid off. They retired the same week Kevin turned 65, and he took Sandra to Portugal for 3 weeks. Nobody calculated whether they could afford it. The mathematical difference between those two families wasn't created by different incomes, or different investment strategies, or different levels of financial sophistication. It was earned by different 40s decisions, most of which seemed small and reasonable and completely normal in the moment they were made. Let me give you specific guidance based on where you actually are right now, because the right moves look different depending on your starting point. If you're in your 20s or early 30s reading this, you have something genuinely priceless: foreknowledge. You now understand that your 40s will present constant pressure to expand your lifestyle during your peak earning years, and you know that pressure is coming before it arrives. Use that. Build automatic retirement contributions now that you never reduce, regardless of what comes up. Define for yourself, while you're still relatively unconstrained, what enough actually looks like. Because your 40s will offer you every possible reason to redefine it upward. And if you don't have a clear answer already, that redefinition will happen automatically and quietly, without you ever consciously choosing it. If you're entering your 40s, or currently in them, you are standing at the most important financial inflection point of your entire life. Not someday, not eventually, right now. What I'd encourage you to do this week is sit down and audit every one of those 5 decision categories honestly. Is your housing appropriately sized, or are you carrying costs that are quietly draining the retirement you're trying to build? Are your vehicles transportation, Or are they status that's costing you hundreds of thousands in future wealth? Are you funding retirement before funding lifestyle? Every yes to lifestyle expansion during this decade is a no to financial freedom later, and most people are saying yes without realizing they're making a choice at all. If you're in your late 40s and you're recognizing yourself in the wrong story, the door is narrower, but it is absolutely not closed. Downsizing housing now, rather than waiting until retirement, releases equity and reduces monthly costs simultaneously. And that freed up cash flow directed aggressively toward retirement still has meaningful compounding time to work. Selling expensive vehicles and replacing them with practical ones. Pursuing a better paying role, even if it means discomfort and change. Adding every possible percentage point to your savings rate right now. These aren't small moves. Every year of aggressive saving from this point forward meaningfully improves your outcome, even if the math is less forgiving than it would have been at 42. And if you're already past your 40s with savings that aren't where they need to be, focus on what remains within your control. Delaying Social Security to maximize benefits. Every year you wait past 62 increases your monthly benefits significantly. Up to age 70 can make a substantial difference in lifetime income. Working a few years longer than originally planned. Downsizing housing to release equity. Eliminating high-interest debt to free up cash flow. None of these are failures. They're intelligent adjustments by someone who is still making active decisions instead of just accepting whatever outcome arrives. I want to address something that underlies all of these decisions, because I think most financial content skips this part, and it makes the advice feel disconnected from how real life actually works. The psychological difficulty of 40s financial discipline comes from a completely understandable place. By the time you're in your early 40s, you've spent roughly 20 years working hard, making sacrifices, being responsible, doing the right thing. And there's this feeling, this very human impulse, that says you've earned the right to finally enjoy some of it. When does the gratification actually arrive? That feeling isn't weakness or irresponsibility. It's just human. But here's the thing that I think is worth sitting with. The lifestyle expansion your 40s brain is craving provides, on average, about 18 months of genuinely elevated happiness. Research on this is pretty consistent. Within a year and a half to 2 years, people fully adapt to their new normal. The bigger house stops feeling exciting and just becomes the house. The nicer car stops turning heads and just becomes how you get to work. The hedonic treadmill catches up completely, and you're left with the same underlying level of satisfaction you had before, just with significantly higher fixed costs and significantly less retirement security. The upgrade provided a temporary pleasure and a permanent constraint. The person who resists lifestyle inflation in their 40s experiences genuine, lasting satisfaction every day of a comfortable retirement. The freedom to stop working, to travel, to help their children, to not lie awake calculating whether the money will last. The discomfort of 40s financial discipline lasts a decade, and the reward lasts the rest of your life. The pleasure of 40s lifestyle inflation lasts about 2 years, and the consequence lasts the rest of your life. When you actually look at it that way, the choice isn't really between enjoying life now versus enjoying it later. It's between 2 years of novelty and 30 years of genuine freedom. I want to leave you with a picture, and I want you to actually sit with it for a moment rather than just letting it pass. Picture yourself at 71 years old. It's a Tuesday morning, the house is quiet, and you've woken up without an alarm. In one version of this morning, your first thought is about what you want to do today, which grandchild you're visiting this weekend, the trip you've been planning for years that you're finally taking, or maybe just the book you're going to read on the porch while the coffee gets cold. You're not immediately checking your account balance. You're not running emergency math to figure out if you're okay. You're just living, fully and freely, because you built something in your 40s that made that kind of morning possible. In the other version of this same morning, your first thought is a number. You ran the calculation last night before bed. Social Security plus the monthly withdrawal from what's left. And it's close. It's too close. You're thinking about whether this is the year you need to go back to part-time work, about what happens if a health issue comes up, about whether your kids will eventually need to step in and help you financially, and how that conversation is going to feel. Both of those people made their 40s decisions decades earlier. Both of them are living, every single morning, with what those decisions built. The door is open right now. Maybe wide open, maybe just cracked, but it is open. And your 40s will end eventually regardless. The decade passes whether you make intentional choices or default ones. The only question is which version of that Tuesday morning you're quietly building toward, one decision at a time. I'm Ken. This is Ken Invest's YouTube channel. And if today's video gave you something real, share it with one person who needs to hear it. Subscribe if you want more honest conversations about money, and I'll see you in the next one. And one last thing. Nothing in this video is financial advice. I'm just showing you what the numbers look like. The decision is always yours.